the Trump administration publicly maintained that it possessed multiple military options should Iran continue using force against domestic demonstrators. Behind the scenes, however, those options had narrowed significantly compared to even a year earlier. Many U.S. military assets, once readily available to the president, had been redeployed elsewhere. Warships and troops previously positioned for Middle East contingencies were now operating in the Caribbean. While a major American air defense system sent to the region the previous year had already returned to South Korea, administration officials confirmed there were no plans for large-scale movements of forces. Although President Trump still retained the authority to order airstrikes against Iranian leadership or military installations, his choices were more limited than during June, when U.S. forces struck Iran's nuclear facilities. At the same time, lawmakers from both parties questioned whether another strike could drag the United States into yet another prolonged conflict in the region. Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island warned that the administration had yet to explain how military force would meaningfully help Iranian civilians or force real political change. The situation was further complicated by dwindling U.S. weapon stockpiles, strained by the pace of operations in the Red Sea, Iran, and Venezuela. Air defense interceptors had become a particular concern. Pentagon officials privately acknowledged that if Iran responded forcefully to a U.S. strike, American defenses might struggle to counter Tehran's extensive missile and rocket arsenal. Around 10,000 U.S. troops remain stationed at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, with smaller deployments in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. Despite these constraints, the White House insisted that Trump still had ample options. Senior officials met to discuss possible responses, though the president did not attend. Meanwhile, protests across Iran, sparked by inflation and government policies, continue to spread, with human rights groups estimating that as many as 2,000 demonstrators had been killed in the crackdown. As tensions escalated, Trump issued a stark warning on Truth Social, vowing that Iran's leadership would pay a big price, and declaring that help for protesters was coming. Yet officials quietly acknowledged that no major troop or asset movements were underway. The USS Ford remained in the Caribbean, while the USS Vinson and USS Nimitz had long since departed the Middle East. The Patriot missile defense system previously deployed to the region had already returned to the Korean Peninsula. Pentagon leadership emphasized readiness to follow presidential orders, while military experts suggested that any response would likely rely on rapid strikes or cyber operations rather than a large buildup of forces. Retired Admiral John Miller noted that potential targets would likely include regime command centers, military facilities, and communications hubs. Even so, resistance in Congress was evident. Several Republican lawmakers opposed deploying U.S. troops, stressing that protecting Iranian civilians did not justify an invasion. Others advocated for sanctions and economic pressure instead of military action. Recent bipartisan votes to limit Trump's authority in Venezuela underscored the growing pushback, with lawmakers warning that any major military operation would require explicit congressional approval. While the administration projected strength, the reality was one of constrained options, political resistance, and rising risks, leaving the path forward uncertain.